So why don't we go ahead and start by having the panel introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yuting from the Media Kitchen. We're in New York City. I am a senior strategist working on all the biddable channels that we buy in-house, meaning paid search, social, and programmatic.
Okay, we're gonna do musical chairs real quick. Sorry, just so everyone knows who they're talking to based on.
This is just so that when you access this later on the video, you know who is who.
Ahmed, yep, and that's Melissa, Rob, and then you got it, right?
I don't know.
No, Rob, and you switch. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, Okay, now we're good.
Okay. After each, do we do this after each question?
My name is Ahmed. I'm with Active International, actually based in the Toronto office, but we have offices internationally.
I'm Melissa Bonnick, head of programmatic strategy at Havas. I'm based out of New York.
Hi, I'm Jayson. I work for US International Media. I look after data, research, analytics for them.
Great, thank you.
I don't have to do it again, right?
So why don't we start with defining what programmatic means to you and your organization?
So to me, programmatic branding, in this case, means data. Data, automation, and getting the message across as many people as possible that fall within your target audience.
For me, it's probably a little less so data because the goal is to try to find people who you may not expect to find. So I think the use of data to help find broader reach, yes. But I do think it's more efficiency and being able to pull in interesting assets or elements that you may not think are actually tied to programmatic, but are in fact branding assets.
Yep, so programmatic branding is a fantastic topic, and one of the things that we were going to talk about is how branding is how is branding relevant. So if we think about brands and you think about how brands grow, we reference back to a book by Byron Sharp all about how brands grow, and he's talking about the typical programmatic kind of approaches, digital approaches, which is more bottom of the funnel. Maintain brands but don't grow brands. And if you want to grow a brand, you've got to start thinking about relevancy and the presence and continuity against prospects who are not currently customers. So how do we make programmatic branding relevant to non-customers and then make it relevant to people who are focused on building brands rather than the kind of technology clients that currently sit in the room? Those are the things that we think about.
So I think to me, it's definitely like about audience, but to our agency, I think it's really depending on the client. Sometimes branding means like for a client, it could be a billboard in Times Square, but sometimes it could be mean like stealing some customers from their competitors. And at the Media Kitchen, we try to do lower funnel buys in-house. But for upper funnel buys, we also talk to a lot of ad tech companies, other vendors who have really innovative creatives and the technology to deploy like very interesting units to get upper funnel consumers.
Do you feel like clients are embracing the idea of programmatic and branding, or do you feel like it can be a challenging conversation?
I can take this one. So I actually do think it's a conversation that brands aren't necessarily thinking initially. I think a lot of them are thinking of content sponsorships or buying a specific, like high impact unit direct with a partner, not necessarily thinking, okay, well, I can actually transact and purchase that programmatically. A really good example would be, for example, the New York Times Flex Frame, or being able to purchase sponsorships and full, skins programmatically. That's stuff that are splashy, give you contextual relevance, bring in people who you may not think to have, and increase the overall reach, but you're not thinking about that when you're thinking about programmatic, which most people just say, okay, it's focused on building sales, building the awareness with the people that we know exist already, or with who we know align closely with the brand.
I think it's I completely agree. I think it's a language barrier. I think it's really hard to, if you talk to a brand manager, the job is 98% not media. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they have to do, all about building the brand, all about thinking about packaging and pricing and distribution. And then when they think about media, they're not wanting really to think about, they don't care about GRPs, they don't care about impressions, they care about the effect that it has. And especially if they're talking about branding, about brand equities, and about how how their brand is positioned in the consumer's mind, the words that we use for programmatic just don't have any relevance. So I just think there's a barrier of language that we need to overcome that allows us to show that this is a benefit to that, not bottom of the funnel conversion, which they're very interested in, they're definitely interested in sales, but also not just awareness, just number of impressions, just number of exposures. There's that middle ground which says, how am I building brand relevancy? And it's very difficult to express that in the world of programmatic.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like the term, how we use the term programmatic, like might bring in some confusion, which could be why sometimes the client think, oh, programmatic is very banner centric, which is probably true, like still the case. Like for a very consolidated in-house DSP at an agency, you probably 80% of your creatives are still like regular standard banners, which is not sexy. That's why we try to talk to a lot of new vendors who can do different creatives, high impact units that can be deployed to their network, which is still programmatic, but a lot of clients don't realize that. And we should probably tell them, educate them, this is also programmatic, and we can definitely do a programmatic for branding.
Yeah, I think a lot of dollars are moving to digital. Because if you think about it, if a brand wants to advertise, let's say on TV, they'll serve a 30-second ad and then that's it. They really don't know how many people they reached, who they reached, whereas with digital, they can get a lot more insights. They'll know, okay, I served X amount of impressions, I got this many uniques, I got this many women between the age of X amount, this many. So there's a lot of data that they're able to get back from a digital perspective. And I feel like a lot more brands and companies are moving towards digital and moving more dollars towards that.
And I thought we had a really interesting conversation yesterday about the difference between dealing with a brand manager and somebody who might have more e-com related responsibilities for performance. And so how as an agency are you guys adjusting the conversation with those groups of folks? Because quite honestly, in my past life, I have experience working with a brand where we were going in and talking about the importance of audience-led programmatic. And at the end of the day, he just said, look, I just want to be on the front page or the homepage of ESPN because I need to establish street cred, and that's more important than trying to find moms who are trying to buy shoes for their kids. So I think there's a lot of education, but I also think from an agency perspective, we have to better equip our talent to speak to branding opportunities. So what are you guys doing internally to shift that conversation?
I just thought today we've already seen 2 great case studies from different clients, and it really illustrates the difference, right? So we had Paul from Bayer this morning, and he said, my KPIs for success is I lowered the cost, and I get cheaper impressions, and that's better than the agency. And then we had another one, and I come from an agency, not surprisingly. And then we had the Pabst example, where they said our KPIs are about exposure to content and integration and understanding about how consumers are engaging with content. And that is much more of a kind of branding KPI conversation. If you set up those branding KPIs up front, then you have a much better conversation about whether programmatic is then delivering on that stuff. If you are going to just have your KPIs as cost, sure, that works, and then it's a level of exposure, but I'm not sure that's going to help in a branding conversation.
I think what we do on our side is we train our strategists to make sure that they can have the technical conversation, but they can also have the higher level conversation and say the terms that the branding manager really cares about. So saying that this is going to increase your reach, this is going to make sure that you are winning that award next week or next month, and not necessarily driving towards, well, technically these are all the things that we can do and this is how we're going to execute it, but more say it from a business standpoint of this is what we think will be really sexy and help drive the overall awareness of your brand and really drive home not just the KPIs that you're looking at, but the message of the brand that you're really looking to drive.
And we're seeing a lot of consolidation happening in the industry when it comes to platforms. I know in our earlier conversation yesterday too, you talked about you guys actually have a really wide breadth of platforms that you go to. Is there truly one platform that's kind of a one solution fits all that allows you to do both branding and performance-based marketing?
I wish I could say yes to that. And that's probably my dream, is to find one DSP or platform where everything actually works and I don't have an issue trying to run it. But there's, at the end of the day, every DSP and platform are going to sign agreements that are bespoke to them or exclusive to them. So you have folks like Alfonso being exclusive through Tremor or something along those lines, or some folks may have a better connection for their PG deals and sponsorships through DBM or through whomever else. So I think having a team and a desk that's really focused on making sure that they're working on those connections and saying, okay, from a branding standpoint, I know that my win rate and my connections, I tend to have a better connection and it's faster through DBM instead of media math, then that's the key focus for us, is making sure that we're delivering those high impact branding units as efficient as possible, and then also making sure that we're staying as abreast of what's going on in the industry in terms of exclusive features within each platform.
I feel like if you work with a DSP, they should have access to all the inventory you need. And as you've seen today, there's a lot of data providers now that above the DSP, you're able to purchase first-party data from those people. So it's not, like, even though your end goal and your end impression is going to be digital, you can still get data from people watching a show on TV. Like yesterday, I was talking to my friend from TiVo, and he was telling me that you could literally find somebody that watched an HBO show. They can give you all those people, and you can find them online. Whereas you're not, all of a sudden, you're not just limited to what's available via the DSP. You still have reach outside of those channels. So, and it's just having that partner that is able to plug into all those different networks.
Yeah, I mean, like, consolidation would be really nice, but also I agree with Melissa. Like, I wish I could say yes. For example, we're working with a vendor called Parsec, and their cost model is cost per attention. So you can set up your own threshold. Say, I only want to pay when my video is being viewed for 10 seconds or 30 seconds. And this kind of technology, I just don't think it's currently compatible with a lot of DSPs.
So talk to us about specific examples of how you leverage programmatic for brand. How are you altering the messaging? Like, what type of KPIs are you guys currently looking at? Can you give us some more insight around how programmatic and brand work within your organization?
Sure, I can start. Great example. We work with the Aruba Tourism Authority. Been a client for several years, and we do a lot of programmatic work with them. And we've evolved from audience targeting, which was what you might expect, which is slightly affluent, with people who are intending to travel to the Caribbean, and we're moving much more towards targeting people's interests. So we're thinking about what people are enjoying on island with cuisine, with health and wellness, and how do we then start to profile different potential customers with their interests as well as just their out-and-out demographics and intention to travel. And this is a good way of, I think, how we illustrate how we're building brand, by looking at the audiences that represent brand building and accepting the fact that it's not going to be specifically lowered CPM cost than perhaps some of the more direct audiences, because we're going middle funnel. We're trying to build consideration, and we're trying to then drive demand that way, as opposed to trying to maintain our share, which would be kind of bottom of the funnel. And we continue to do that, but then we build interest higher up through that branding process.
It all depends on the client. Like, there's some clients that will come and say, I just want to get my creative in front of as many eyes as possible. There's other clients that determine success based on how many people actually came to their site. So they look at CTR, but that's not really, there's a lot of accidental clicks that happen, which can fluctuate the number. There's also the fraud aspect. I think it's very important to always pixel your client sites, because then that way, not only are you getting first-party data from their site, but you're also looking at people that saw an ad, didn't click on it, but then remembered the message and came back to the site later on. Also, you're able to, from an attribution perspective, you're able to see, okay, I served this person a video, they didn't come, then after that we did sequential messaging where we served them some display, and then they came afterwards, whether they clicked on it or they came organically. And I feel like it's a very easy out when the client says, oh, I can't pixel the site, just do impressions. Really, anybody can serve impressions and you can get them cheap, but it's about serving the impressions in front of the right audience and getting most of that value.
From our standpoint, generally we try to drive as much as we can towards new assets and elements that may be in beta. So for example, for a recent client, we tested and ran for them live stream. So video assets served during live stream of specific games. And that actually proved to build overall awareness for them pretty darn well. We're working with a few other folks to possibly launch programs with AR or AI or augmented reality. And then of course, specifically driving towards dynamic radio ads. So instead of doing just a focus on one asset, we're really trying to make sure that the asset itself is really dynamic and driving towards new users.
Do you see that programmatic branding is coming mostly from the traditional side of the business where we're trying to go after TV dollars, or do you see it living somewhere else?
I would probably say it's a mixture of both. There seems to be some interest in terms of being able to buy TV or being able to buy even radio with a digital mindset. But at the same time, there's also this need to really have a holistic approach when it comes to your overall campaign. So being able to see full funnel, seeing how your reach has gone through the entire campaign from overall awareness and branding down to your e-com plays. So I think it's actually both that we're seeing the change happen.
And I think the industry has evolved a lot over the years to allow for programmatic branding at scale. Are you seeing a lot of, are you seeing the challenges being overcome today compared to 3 or 4 years ago? Do you see publishers willingly, at the table with you negotiating how to activate, custom branding buys through programmatic channels? Or do you see still a lot of resistance?
I think it's definitely getting easier. We're actually trying to, but we're doing less business with site direct, but definitely more like audience network. And a lot of those audience network, they come up with their own programmatic solutions. Like we can deploy my units across all my sites, and this is what we have been seeing.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm with the people we work with and our vendor partners in terms of how do we use data to better craft the stories to deliver to potential customers. The message that we need to do, and that goes on through addressable and programmatic TV, as well as some of the other newer formats. But it's the ability for us to do that is expanding very quickly. And I've seen a lot of enthusiasm from clients where we see really positive returns.
Switching back to clients, when clients are resistant to the idea of programmatic brand, what are they saying? Why are they hesitant around investment in programmatic channels for branding?
Well, again, I think it's just a matter of explaining or working out and selling the right KPIs, right? I mean, if we're going to be selling it simply on it's a lower CPM, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. I think, just like we saw in the last case study, if you start to sell this on a much stronger integration of content and engagement and kind of some of those middle funnel consideration metrics, it's perfect. And you can really then start to actually get some proper measurement on some of those things.
Yeah, I think a lot of times maybe they just don't see it being as sexy as an out-of-home ad or a TV commercial. And there's some resistance in terms of, okay, great, you served an ad. How do I know those people weren't going to come anyway? How do I know that those people weren't my customers anyway? So to Rob's point, you really just have to educate them on essentially what you're doing, who you're reaching out to, how it works and how it all ties down. I remember like 4 years ago, cross-device was very hard to accomplish, and now it's like, now you could literally do sequential messaging from somebody seeing a TV commercial, finding them online, serving them a video, running something on their mobile, and then on their desktop as well. So relating that to the client and letting them understand those capabilities, I think that's where they're finding it's a lot easier to bring more dollars to digital and programmatic branding.
I also think it's important for clients to understand that you can replicate the experience through automation. And so, you know, when a client says, I need that homepage takeover, well, great, I can go get an IO signed, or I can actually ask ESPN to make the inventory available through a platform like DBM. And so you're still getting the experience, but you're also, the other added value is you're getting that data. And so hopefully what that allows you to do is it opens up opportunities around new audience targeting based on exposure, how people are interacting with those ads, and hopefully it offers a more holistic picture of who your audience is and how they're engaging.
Yeah, if like a client is very sales-driven, then I think it's actually easier to sell them programmatic because you can get the data and you can serve the sequential messaging that you can follow up with them, but by just doing like a direct buy, you might not get all these.
Do you have any clients that are doing 100% programmatic for the full funnel?
So I think we have quite a few clients now who are doing about 95 to 98% through programmatic. It's just their content sponsorships and the plays that we cannot replicate that they're running through direct pipes. But if it can run, generally we have a very open line of communication with the client and the teams to say, they'll come to us and say, hey, we've got this person that we just spoke with. They mentioned that we can do it programmatically. Can you vet it? Have you run it before with someone else? And if we say yes, they go, okay, here's some tags, let's go. So it's pretty good on the in terms of just the take rate.
I don't know if I have any clients that are running 100%, but I've definitely seen a huge increase over the years, whereas like it'll jump from 30% maybe 2-3 years ago to now 60 or 70% of their budget, because again, like they're able to get a lot more insights and data onto who's seeing the ads and who's actually doing something online.
No, not that I can think of. I mean, I think you know, we don't approach. It's kind of, it would be an odd way to think about things. I don't think it's necessary for us to be programmatic or not. You know, if it's the right way to approach the marketplace for that client to reach that audience, great. And if not, there are other ways as well. And oftentimes, you know, just like times where agencies were accused of being TV first, and you know, we don't want to be accused of being programmatic first either. And you know, there's some danger in that. And you know, we've seen from ANA reports that you know, black box buying can be a bit of a problem. And so, you know, I think you've got to be a little neutral about how and why you start to apply these techniques in the market.
And I just have to dissent a little, and the reason why I say that is because when you start to have publishers who are becoming programmatic first, I mean, when you have the Spotifys, et cetera, we have to move in the direction that these publishers are moving. So if Spotify is offering me things that they used to do direct, then it's in my best interest to take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like, I mean, I agree with Rob. It's really, we don't have anyone like doing programmatic 100%, but if it's the right buy, then we don't have to do it programmatically. If it's not, then it's just
so let's talk about programmatic brand in the future. You know, in 2 or 3 years, what do you expect the landscape to look like? Do we anticipate a one-stop shop actually coming to fruition, or do we think that the industry is still pretty far away from that?
I think a lot of companies think they're a one-stop shop right now. There is still a way to go, but it's definitely like I do see it happening. To be 100% fully automated, I don't ever see that happening, only because of the fraud aspect, and you have to have like eyes kind of looking at it and making sure that what's being served is actually happening, and the data that you're getting is genuine. So from that perspective of it being kind of 100% automated in the future and a one-stop shop and whatnot, It's possible, but I do see that there still has to be some level of kind of monitoring and whatnot.
I wish. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're still going to have elements that are going to be created that are not going to be available programmatically, or publishers are going to create things that they want to keep as a direct sales play. So we're probably not going to be able to do fun, splashy content sponsorships or full-on sponsored articles that don't look like, you know, they are in fact sponsored articles. But there's some things that I do wish and hope that we really get as far as maybe some other regions in the world do. Like, for example, really being able to leverage digital out of home and have better attribution and measurement on that. That's something that would be great to see soon rather than later. But I don't think that we're going to get everything that's great for branding through programmatic pipes.
I think I'd like to see in an advancement some of the applications of AI that we're seeing in, you know, in search and in Facebook and so forth. You know, if we can apply that towards audience development and be a bit more holistic, you know, get that further up into the strategic planning development piece, I think that would be great. So if we start to have some of these AI-driven insight tools that can predict what content is going to drive more engagement, and then that can then translate into creative strategies and into messaging. You know, all that stuff is going to get a little bit more integrated as those AI platforms become more solid and you know, less concentrated on one particular platform. I think that's going to be great, and that's going to help us drive up this programmatic branding conversation as you start to inform more strategy, more messaging, all of that kind of stuff.
One-stop shop, I think no. If it does happen, it's probably like for a hot second and super temporarily. There are always people and companies out there would come up with new stuff. And to get all the new technology be immediately compatible in a one-stop shop, I just like, I mean, historically that never happened, and I don't think that would happen in the future.
We can go to Q&A. Anybody have any questions of the panel? Yeah.
Rob, you made a point earlier about the fact that we need to keep in mind that many of our clients don't just handle media, they do a range of marketing responsibilities, and I think it is important for us to educate them in a proper way. I just want to get a clarification if you guys agree with this. That might be confusing things a bit. Programmatic is just a way to buy. It's the inventory or the type of inventory that you purchase that can be used for awareness purposes, which are usually brand oriented, or more direct response purposes like standard display. Would you guys agree with that?
I think that's definitely simplifying it. I don't disagree with it, but I think there's a lot of nuance to it, and I think it's all dependent on what client you're speaking to. There may be aspects of audience that you want to upplay. There may be data. There may be the use of contextual relevance. Programmatic is, in fact, yes, the way of buying, but there's so many different layers to it that you need to be able to craft that sentence specific to the client so that they understand the benefits of it for their specific plans.
And I think we have to be really careful about oversimplifying programmatic too, because I think that's where, and I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but sometimes clients don't understand all the work that has to be done and all the levers that are being pulled on the back end. You know, you want to give them enough insight so that they're comfortable, you know, hearing about it and that they can speak to it at a high level. But you want to be really careful not to oversimplify. There's a lot more that goes into it.
I guess, but no. I don't know. I mean, it's very important to us in the room, super important to us in the room, and you know, the technical aspects of it are fantastically important. But how the sausage is made, you know, unless the client is a sausage maker, how the sausage is made is not, you know, a particularly interesting story for them, and telling them more detail about that isn't really relevant. I don't think clients, you know, they didn't really care about how many GRPs they got. They cared about the effects that it had against the competition, and you know, what kind of results were being driven. I think it's important for us to, you know, create, and you know, we work with people like Datorama, are fantastic at being able to create a dashboard that can deliver insights that tell people how things are working and what effect it's having on the customer. That's great. telling them the story of how the sausage is made, got to be very careful about that stuff because it's more meaningful for us than it is to them.
Right, but I think even how you just explained it was a little more than just saying it's a more efficient way of media buying. It's a more efficient way of media buying that provides insights. That's the piece that I'm saying is the little bit extra that we need to make sure to say to the client so that they understand that it's not just media buying, it's not just doing it in an efficient manner, it's giving you additional data, it's giving you the ability to pull in or to pull users from where you may not necessarily be tracking, and then go from there.
Yes, that's good.
Hi, Ed Camargo, PMX Agency. Apparently we're powering this. So my question is, we have clients that are moving up the funnel programmatically and are asking about how to do it, but then when it comes to measuring, right, they get very, I guess, paranoid about whether it's really working or not. And so for us, it's a combination of explaining them they need to open up the window to understand how far back consideration really started. How do you guys deal with technologies that are limited to 30 days, 90 days?
We have a fractional attribution implemented, and I think that would help always to explain to your client that, okay, those upper funnel buys actually bring in this many customers, and like later on, you can serve them more follow-up messages. But the reality is we also have a lot of data loss, and also like a lot of clients wants to see immediate results, and it is definitely I would say it is a restriction, but that's just upper funnel buys.
Yeah, if you've got a client who said, I want to build engagement and I want to build consideration and all these attributes, but it's also got to sell within a period, yeah, you've got a tough sell. I mean, I think we're doing two slightly different paths, right? One of which is making sure we're still converting people and retaining our customers and looking at switching when people are going to final purchase. And then there is another path, which is figuring out the audiences which are going to build the brand in the future. Can you track those build the brand audiences back to a final sale? I don't think we're quite there yet, but I don't think that's the purpose of why we would be doing that and going into that conversation.
I completely agree with what you said at the end of it. I think it's having that conversation with the client. I know. It's having that conversation with the client to clearly say, branding is X, e-com and the lower funnel actions are Y. You can say that you want your branding aspects to eventually drive it, but when you're looking at your brand and awareness plays in other areas, you're not saying, did it drive my core KPI of a sale later on down the road, or did it just increase my number of likes on Instagram? It's about making sure that that KPI is in fact a branding KPI and not a performance KPI.
So if your client's kind of having doubts about how effective it is, I would just ask them one simple question, like how would you measure a TV commercial being played? If you're spending money on a commercial on TV, one, you don't know if somebody went to the washroom while that commercial was playing. You don't know if somebody actually saw it. You don't know how many people saw it. You just have a brief estimate. Whereas with digital, you can track video completions. You can track viewability. You can track how many impressions. You can actually track how many people saw the ad at how many times. So there's a lot more insights that you're able to provide your client in that sense compared to other media channels.
Yeah, and I think you can always, try to correlate different aspects of targeting, whether it's for branding or performance, against each other, and looking at different KPIs. So even though for branding, you probably don't want to have a CPA KPI, you could look at things like new customer acquisition or unique traffic to help validate that you are reaching new customers and you're not wasting ad dollars.
Jawan Wright from Ibotta. Dialogue's been great, so thanks for everybody on the panel. With GDPR, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, a lot of people are asking more questions about how are we getting all this information on these people and where. You mentioned selling programmatic to the client and getting them to buy in. How much does transparency come up in those conversations? And when it comes to, data extraction, modeling technology, things like that, people are sick of getting the black box answer, right? You kind of mentioned Rob talking about how did you make the sausage. Are people, and especially people on your side, are they doing more to try and understand where are you getting this data? How are you getting it? Is it direct from consumer? Is it modeled via different data points that don't make sense, et cetera?
So from our standpoint, transparency is I do think that Havas does a really good job of being extremely clear and transparent on how we're doing things and where we're doing things. While we do try to stay as data agnostic as we possibly can, we do tell the client that these are the people who we think of using. We tell them the sample data segments that we're more than likely going to use. And then if they ask, because remember this is also a difference between a branding conversation and a performance one, where a performance person is, or an e-com person is more likely to ask those hard questions in terms of data, but a branding person will probably say more along the lines of like, higher level in terms of asset types and CTAs and recommendations in terms of creative assets. But that if they do ask, we do have dictionaries that we provide to them saying, this is where we're getting our data from. This is who we're probably going to leverage. This is how they build their data sets. If it's lookalike, this is the percentage variance that we're planning on looking at, and on down the road.
So we are going to move this over to roundtables in a second that Rob is going to be leading. Melissa, I hope you join him because I think you guys have like a road show going. You guys could join up for an act.
Please feel free to say that to my marketing team. Thank you.
But Laura and panel, thank you very much. Before we break down